"You brought me here to punish a dead man," Imani Wells said, standing beside the locked door of a guest suite at Rourke House. "You only needed his daughter to make the punishment feel alive." Sebastian Rourke did not deny it. At 38, he had built a reputation across Chicago for turning family influence into disciplined control. But the morning light from Lake Michigan exposed the strain beneath his charcoal suit and cold gray eyes. He told Imani that 20 years earlier her father, David Wells, had stolen records from the Rourke Employee Trust, blamed Sebastian's mother for the missing money, and vanished before the family could clear her name. Eleanor Rourke had died believing the world considered her dishonest. Now a sealed audit envelope had appeared in an estate storage room with Imani's current address written on the back. Sebastian had arranged a false housekeeping interview, sent a card to bring her from Chicago, and ordered the estate doors secured after she arrived. He wanted the missing trust ledger, and he wanted her to understand what her father had cost his family. Imani, a 29-year-old African-American woman with deep brown skin, steady brown eyes, and natural black hair in a low braided bun, had spent 5 years working in private homes while completing evening courses in records administration. She had accepted the interview because Rourke House offered health coverage and regular hours. Not because she knew anything about an audit. She demanded her phone, her bag, and the right to leave. Sebastian replied that confidential family material had been found among her application papers and that his attorney would determine whether she could go. Imani walked to the desk, lifted the unsigned employment packet, and tore it cleanly in half. "An accusation is not a contract," she said. "A locked door is not an investigation." Before Sebastian could answer, Claire Mason, the family's outside attorney, entered with an expression that made his security staff retreat without instruction. Claire confirmed that Imani had entered voluntarily under false pretenses and that no court order, employment agreement, or lawful emergency justified restricting her movement. She ordered the door opened, returned Imani's property, and warned Sebastian that his grief had become coercion. He unlocked the door himself. Imani could have left, but Claire placed a certified copy of the audit envelope on the desk. The handwriting on the back belonged to Imani's father. Beneath her address were 6 words: "Ask Eleanor where the first ledger sleeps." Imani had been 12 when David died in a traffic accident, and no one had ever told her he knew Eleanor Rourke. She chose to remain for 1 hour, with the door open and Claire present, because clearing her father's name mattered more than Sebastian's revenge. Then Claire turned the envelope over and found a faded visitor stamp dated 3 days after David's funeral. Claire recorded that decision before the search could begin. The visitor stamp came from Rourke House, yet the official guest register listed no one from the Wells family during that month. Claire photographed both sides of the envelope, sealed the original in an evidence sleeve, and drafted a temporary protocol before anyone touched another record. Imani would not become a maid, would not live on the estate, and would not report to Sebastian. She would work for 3 days as an independent records consultant, receive hotel accommodations in her own name, keep unrestricted access to her phone and transportation, and stop at any time without losing payment. Sebastian accepted every term because the alternative was watching the only new lead leave with the woman he had wronged. Imani accepted because the phrase about the first ledger sounded like something her father would write. David had taught her that important records often survived in ordinary places because powerful people searched safes before they searched workrooms. Their first search began in the old service corridor, where Eleanor had once supervised the employee trust from a narrow office beside the linen room. Sebastian expected Imani to follow his directions. Instead, she asked him to remain outside while Claire documented the shelves. He objected until she reminded him that his presence could turn every discovery into a claim of influence. The boundary irritated him, but he obeyed. Inside, Imani found expense binders, uniform inventories, and a cedar filing box whose brass label had been removed. The dust pattern showed that a rectangular object had rested there until recently. A maintenance log recorded that Nathaniel Rourke, Sebastian's 52-year-old uncle and current board vice chair, had requested access to the corridor 2 weeks earlier for an insurance inspection. The estate key system retained only 12 months of digital history, but a paper sign-out sheet showed Nathaniel had borrowed the old brass archive key on the same date the audit envelope appeared. Sebastian said his uncle had spent years defending Eleanor's reputation and had no reason to hide evidence. Imani answered that loyalty should be tested by records, not family rank. Behind the cedar box she found a blue carbon copy from an employee trust deposit. The account number matched a charitable fund Nathaniel had later claimed never existed. A second clue appeared in the paper itself. The copy carried a watermark from a stationer that closed in 2005, proving it had not been planted recently. Claire contacted the bank's archival department and requested microfilm under the trust's legal authority. Sebastian watched Imani log every step, including his original unlawful confinement. He asked whether she intended to use that entry against him. She said the truth did not become revenge merely because it carried consequences. Before they left the corridor, a hidden compartment in the cedar box opened under pressure from the removed label. Inside was not a ledger, but Eleanor's employee identification card and a small key tagged with the number 417. Key 417 belonged to a private document locker at a downtown Chicago trust office that had merged twice since Eleanor's death. The successor institution confirmed the locker still existed, but access required either a named beneficiary or a court-approved representative. Sebastian assumed his family name would be sufficient. The bank declined his request within an hour. Eleanor had excluded every Rourke relative from direct access and named David Wells as alternate custodian. Because David was dead, the institution required proof of succession from his estate. Imani became the only person with a plausible claim, but she refused to sign anything until an attorney independent of the Rourke family reviewed it. Claire supported the demand and arranged for outside counsel without selecting the lawyer herself. Sebastian heard the condition as another public judgment against him. News of Imani's confinement had already reached a business columnist through an unnamed family source, and the article described him as a ruthless heir holding a black maid over an old theft claim. The description was incomplete but not false. Nathaniel urged him to deny everything, dismiss Claire, and characterize Imani as an extortionist who had exploited household access. Sebastian nearly followed that advice because control offered immediate relief. Instead, he issued a statement admitting that Imani had been brought to the estate under false pretenses and prevented from leaving for a short period without lawful authority. He did not blame staff or grief. He confirmed that she was now free, independently represented, and working only by her own choice. The admission damaged his standing with several directors and strengthened a civil complaint Imani could bring against him. But it ended the lie. She did not thank him. She told him that correcting a public falsehood was an obligation, not a gift. Their work continued under harsher scrutiny. The bank provided a catalog description for Locker 417, one bound ledger, one sealed statement, and one jewelry item deposited by Eleanor Rourke in 2005. Yet the locker's inventory had been amended in 2007 to say the ledger was withdrawn by David Wells. The amendment carried David's signature, but Imani recognized a flaw. Her father always wrote his middle initial with a closed loop, while the form showed an open stroke. Claire requested the original signature card. Sebastian searched old board minutes and discovered that Nathaniel had testified in 2007 that David confessed to taking the ledger before his death. The testimony had never been independently verified. Then the trust office located a delivery receipt for the amended inventory. It had been submitted by courier from Rourke House 6 months after David died. The receiving clerk had recorded the courier's initials. Nr. Sebastian read them twice, and the certainty he had built his revenge upon began to fracture. At that moment, Nathaniel called and warned him that opening Locker 417 would destroy what remained of Eleanor's dignity. Nathaniel's warning gave Sebastian his first clear reason to distrust the man who had raised him after Eleanor's death. It also exposed how badly he wanted a simple villain. For 2 decades, David Wells had occupied that role, allowing Sebastian to mourn his mother without questioning the family members who controlled her records. Imani refused to replace one untested story with another. She asked Claire to separate verified facts from assumptions on a whiteboard. Verified. Eleanor created Locker 417, named David alternate custodian, and excluded the Rourke family. Verified. An inventory amendment bearing a questionable signature arrived after David's death from Rourke House. Verified. Nathaniel had recently accessed the service corridor and urged Sebastian to keep the locker closed. Unverified. Whether Nathaniel forged the amendment, whether the ledger remained in the locker, and why Eleanor trusted David. The discipline kept Sebastian from converting suspicion into another act of revenge. The independent attorney confirmed that Imani, as personal representative of David's small estate, could petition for access. The trust office scheduled an opening with a compliance officer, Claire, and both legal representatives present. Before that meeting, Imani returned to the estate to review Eleanor's correspondence. She wore a navy suit instead of a uniform, and Sebastian noticed how the family staff addressed her differently when her authority no longer came through service. He apologized for having imagined her only as a path to her father. She answered that his apology would matter if his later choices remained accountable. In Eleanor's desk they found letters to retired employees whose medical reimbursements had been delayed. Each letter promised that the trust would be protected from family borrowing. A blue carbon number in the corner matched the deposit slip from the cedar box. Sebastian remembered Nathaniel explaining those delays as Eleanor's careless bookkeeping. Imani found no carelessness. The totals reconciled until one large transfer moved funds into a development partnership controlled by Nathaniel. A board resolution appeared to authorize the transfer. But the meeting date fell during Eleanor's hospitalization. Claire compared the resolution with the official minutes and found that the approval page had been inserted later. The paper came from a newer manufacturer, and the notary seal belonged to a commission that had expired before the stated signing date. Those were the second and third planted clues, each independent of memory or family loyalty. Sebastian wanted to confront Nathaniel immediately. Imani stopped him, not to protect Nathaniel, but to protect the evidence. If warned, he could destroy records or shape witnesses. Sebastian yielded and placed all estate archives under an outside preservation order. That decision cost him direct control of his own house. Near midnight, Claire received confirmation that locker 417 had been frozen. Someone had attempted to access it that afternoon using a letter of authority signed in Sebastian's name. Sebastian had signed no such letter. Every step was timed, witnessed, copied, and stored outside family control. The forged authority letter forced Sebastian to choose between family secrecy and public process. Claire recommended an emergency filing to preserve the locker and obtain the trust office's security records. Nathaniel argued that involving a court would revive old accusations against Eleanor and expose internal finances. He offered a private compromise. The family would pay Imani a generous settlement, issue a statement clearing David, and leave locker 417 unopened. Imani understood the offer as proof that her father's reputation had become negotiable property. She refused before Sebastian could answer. Sebastian then rejected the compromise publicly and authorized Claire to file the preservation request, even though doing so would place his own unlawful conduct in the same record. The court granted limited protection over the documents and required an independent opening. That afternoon, Sebastian resigned from temporary oversight of the employee trust until the audit ended. Several directors called the step weakness. Imani saw it as the first decision he made that reduced his power without increasing her dependence. Their trust advanced through restraint rather than closeness. He stopped asking her to explain her father's motives. And she stopped assuming that every silence concealed a command. They worked at opposite ends of a conference table, tracing deposits through old bank codes. One transfer repeatedly returned to a company called North Shore Civic Partners. Public records showed Nathaniel as an original manager, but the ownership page had later disappeared from the corporate archive. A surviving tax schedule confirmed the connection. The missing money had financed a failed real estate project, not David's escape or Eleanor's personal spending. Imani also found that David continued making small trust deposits after he supposedly stole the ledger. He had used cashier's checks purchased from his own savings, apparently replacing amounts diverted before employees noticed. The discovery did not turn him into a flawless hero. It showed a man trying to protect workers while gathering enough proof to challenge people stronger than he was. Sebastian asked why David had not gone directly to authorities. Imani said she did not know and would not invent courage or fear for a dead man. Claire later found a draft whistleblower letter in Eleanor's archived legal file. It stated that she and David planned to disclose unauthorized transfers after securing the original ledger off-site. The final page was missing. That evening, Sebastian received an edited audio recording in which Imani appeared to tell her attorney that the Rourkes would pay whatever she demanded. Nathaniel sent the same clip to directors and reporters. Sebastian listened once, then asked for the full file rather than accusing her. Imani provided her attorney's recording, which revealed the complete sentence. The Rourkes would pay whatever she demanded only if money could replace a name. And it could not. For the first time, Sebastian chose verification before fear. The full recording also captured a background voice naming the person who had supplied the edited clip, Nathaniel's executive assistant. The edited recording failed to divide them, so Nathaniel changed tactics. He petitioned the board to remove Sebastian for reputational misconduct and argued that Imani had compromised the trust investigation by becoming personally influential. The claim carried enough truth to be dangerous. Sebastian had confined her, hidden behind family power, and then placed unusual attention on her work. Imani told him that defending himself by declaring her loyal would repeat the same problem. Her credibility could not depend on his feelings. Claire proposed a stricter separation. Imani would report only to the independent compliance officer. Sebastian would receive the same evidence summaries as other directors, and all meetings between them would be logged. He agreed. The arrangement created emotional distance just as mutual respect had begun to feel personal. But neither tried to escape it. Locker 417 was opened under camera documentation at the trust office. Inside lay the original bound ledger, Eleanor's sealed statement, and a plain gold signet ring engraved with the Rourke crest. The ledger showed unauthorized transfers approved through Nathaniel's development partnership. David's handwritten notes marked discrepancies and listed dates when Eleanor confronted her brother-in-law. The sealed statement explained the ring. Eleanor had given it to David as proof that he acted with her authority when moving the ledger. She feared Nathaniel would accuse him of theft, so she recorded that David was protecting the employee trust at her request. She also admitted she had delayed disclosure because Nathaniel threatened to expose Sebastian's youthful financial mistakes and remove her from the family foundation. Her silence had harmed David, his family, and the employees she intended to protect. The truth did not preserve Eleanor as innocent. It revealed a frightened woman who made compromises, then tried too late to correct them. Sebastian read the statement without defending her. The revenge that had organized 20 years of his grief collapsed because its foundation had been manufactured by Nathaniel and sustained by Eleanor's silence. He left the room before the others. But he did not order the documents sealed. Instead, he instructed Claire to provide certified copies to Imani's attorney, the compliance examiner, and the employee trustees. Later, at Rourke House, he found Imani in the open service office reviewing pension names. He told her he had built his identity around punishing the wrong family. She answered that recognizing collapse was not the same as repairing damage. He agreed and asked what repair required. She listed public correction, restored funds, independent governance, and consequences for his confinement of her. He accepted every item without bargaining. Then Claire called with a final complication. The original ledger ended 6 months before the largest transfer, meaning another record still existed. Eleanor's statement referred to it as the night book, kept where Sebastian first learned to count. Imani understood that distance was not punishment. It was the only way any future trust could remain voluntary and verifiable. Sebastian first learned to count in the estate conservatory, where Eleanor used black and white floor tiles to teach him numbers during winter afternoons. The room had been closed after storm damage and later converted into storage. Under Claire's preservation protocol, an independent facilities team opened it while Imani observed. They found no hidden safe or dramatic compartment. Instead, a row of old planter invoices contained handwritten totals that did not match the printed amounts. Imani recognized Eleanor's method from the employee letters. The final digits corresponded to trust account entries. When arranged by date, the invoices formed a transaction index. It pointed to monthly statements stored on microfilm at a community bank absorbed years earlier by a regional institution. Claire obtained them through the court order. The records showed that the largest transfer had been reversed 3 days after it occurred, then sent into a temporary escrow controlled jointly by Eleanor and David. The money had never reached Nathaniel's project. Eleanor and David had protected it. But Nathaniel later altered the trust's internal books to make the reversal disappear and used the apparent loss to destroy both of them. He then borrowed against family assets by claiming he was replacing stolen employee funds. The scheme gave him influence, sympathy, and control over Sebastian's inheritance. Imani and Sebastian now had motive, method, and documentary sequence, but Claire insisted on one more element: proof that Nathaniel knew the internal ledger was false. Evelyn Hart, the retired housekeeper who had served Eleanor, was the only surviving witness named in the Night Book Index. She agreed to speak after Imani contacted her through the employee trust, not through Sebastian. Evelyn said Nathaniel had ordered her to replace a binder in Eleanor's office after David's funeral. She had refused to destroy the original and had mailed it to Claire's predecessor. But the package was returned unopened. She kept the mailing receipt and a photocopy of Nathaniel's written instruction. For years she remained silent because her pension and housing assistance depended on the family. The new independent structure allowed her to testify without seeking Nathaniel's permission. Sebastian listened to her account with visible shame. His power had not created Nathaniel's fraud. But the family system he inherited had kept witnesses afraid. He asked Evelyn what he could do. She said he could stop calling silence loyalty. The board scheduled a public compliance hearing. Nathaniel tried once more to negotiate, offering to resign quietly if the family sealed Eleanor's statement and omitted Sebastian's confinement of Imani. Sebastian refused. Imani also refused to let the hearing become a performance of his redemption. She would testify about records, not forgive him on command. The night before the hearing, Sebastian signed a binding agreement transferring Rourke House employment decisions to an independent office and accepting outside review of Imani's civil claim. Then he placed the agreement beside the signet ring and waited for the truth to cost him everything it should. The compliance hearing took place in a Chicago conference center with employee trustees, directors, counsel, and an independent examiner present. Nathaniel arrived prepared to describe the dispute as a family misunderstanding magnified by an ambitious former maid. Claire answered with chronology. The stationer watermark authenticated the old carbon copy. The paper analysis exposed the inserted board resolution. The expired notary commission invalidated the approval page. Bank microfilm traced the diverted funds into Nathaniel's development partnership, while the escrow records proved Eleanor and David had reversed the largest transfer. Locker 417 supplied the original ledger, Eleanor's sealed statement, and the signet ring she gave David as evidence of authority. The attempted locker access used a forged letter in Sebastian's name. Full audio metadata showed Nathaniel's office created the edited recording of Imani. Evelyn Hart testified that he ordered the estate binder replaced after David's funeral and produced the original written instruction with a dated mailing receipt. Nathaniel challenged every witness separately. But the records supported one another without relying on loyalty. When the examiner asked why he had urged Sebastian to confine Imani, Nathaniel denied knowing she was prevented from leaving. Claire played a recorded board call from that morning in which he said fear would make her surrender whatever David had hidden. The statement ended his claim of neutrality. Nathaniel finally admitted that he had encouraged Sebastian's revenge because a grieving heir was easier to guide than an informed trustee. He insisted that he had protected the family from scandal. Sebastian responded that Nathaniel had protected control by making Eleanor's fear, David's reputation, and Imani's freedom expendable. The board removed Nathaniel from every position, froze disputed compensation, and referred the financial record for civil and regulatory review. Sebastian then addressed the room without asking sympathy. He admitted that he had lured Imani to Rourke House, restricted her movement without lawful authority, and treated inherited accusation as permission. He accepted the independent review, waived any family confidentiality defense over the incident, and stepped back from executive authority for 6 months. The employee trust received restored funds, outside trustees, and direct access to records. David Wells was formally named in the board minutes as a custodian who protected the trust, while Eleanor's failures and efforts were recorded without turning either into mythology. Imani testified last. She explained how ordinary invoices, access logs, and ignored staff knowledge exposed a 20-year lie. She did not describe Sebastian as redeemed. She said accountability began when Power stopped editing the record. After the hearing, he returned the signet ring to the trust archive rather than keeping it as family property. Claire handed Imani a sealed copy of Eleanor's statement and a court-certified letter clearing David. Then she revealed one final page from the night book. Eleanor had intended to appoint Imani's father as the trust's first independent director. And David had nominated his daughter as a future records scholar if she ever chose the work freely. 1 year later, the east wing of Rourke House no longer contained locked service offices. It had become the headquarters of the Independent Employee Trust, with public governance rules, private consultation rooms, and a record center named for David Wells and Evelyn Hart. Imani did not accept the future role mentioned in Eleanor's note merely because her father had imagined it. She completed her certification in records management, applied through an outside panel, and was selected as Director of Archival Integrity after competing with other candidates. Her contract did not pass through Sebastian, and her housing, health insurance, and salary were independent of the Rourke family. Nathaniel's transactions were being unwound through formal proceedings. Retired employees had received corrected benefits, and the board had published the history of the trust without hiding Eleanor's delay or Sebastian's conduct. Sebastian returned to a limited executive role only after the outside review. He entered a civil settlement with Imani that included compensation, legal fees, and mandatory governance reforms, none of which required confidentiality or forgiveness. He also established a rule that no family security employee could restrict a worker's movement without lawful authority and immediate outside review. The rule could not undo one locked door, but it made repeating that abuse harder. For months, Sebastian and Imani kept their contact professional. When trust meetings ended, he left before she did. When reporters asked whether she had changed him, she said adults were responsible for changing themselves. His choices remained consistent when she offered no praise. He corrected directors who called David a loyal servant, because David had been a professional custodian and whistleblower, not a possession. He visited Eleanor's grave without using grief to excuse revenge. Imani noticed the changes but did not owe them a relationship. Their first personal conversation happened at a public cafe in Chicago after she had ended every contractual matter connected to her claim. Sebastian asked whether she would permit him to apologize without expecting comfort. She agreed. He said he had mistaken pain for evidence, power for protection, and punishment for loyalty to his mother. Imani told him that collapse became useful only when someone rebuilt with stronger rules. Over the following months, they met rarely and honestly. Affection grew through questions, boundaries, and choices that could be withdrawn. On the second anniversary of the hearing, they stood in the record center beside the original ledger. Sebastian asked whether she would attend dinner with him, not as an employee, witness, symbol, or debt. Imani studied him long enough to make silence uncomfortable. Then she said yes because she was free to say no. He did not reach for her until she offered her hand. The truth had broken the revenge that brought her to Rourke House. But it did not magically erase harm. What saved them was slower, public accountability, restored names, surrendered control, and a love chosen only after neither person could command the other.